Hi. In this session, we are going to talk about how to incorporate regulating DBT skills into an active safety plan. Now, this is very important, especially if you are going to be doing adherent DBT or even comprehensive DBT. Most of the clients that come through your door will likely have had a history of either para-suicidal gestures, self-harm, or very active suicidal ideation. Now, what we do know from the research that most of the time with borderline personality disorder, even though individuals with that diagnosis often engage in para-suicidal gestures and attempts, they are often driven by impulse versus an active desire to die. And if they successfully die by suicide, it is often an accident. What I mean by that is, many years ago, I worked with a woman who had decided to kind of take an overdose of her medication in order to let her boyfriend come and find her, and she left a kind of cryptic message for him. But unfortunately, she had assumed that he would be back at a particular time after work as he normally was, but he had detours that day, and unfortunately, that cost her her life. And so this is not an uncommon form of a para-suicidal gesture that has gone horribly, horribly astray. And so it is imperative that you have a very active safety plan that incorporates the DBT skills that you are teaching. And so what's first most important is to be able to identify what are these behaviors that need to be eliminated or extinguished. And I mean, quite frankly, it is to eliminate and extinguish anything that is life-threatening that interferes with our ability to build a life worth living. And so clients do need to come in with the most base commitment to extinguishing and eliminating those behaviors. And so if a client is not willing to do that, then you're going to spend more time working on motivational interviewing to help them see what is it that they want to take action on. But this may be a major deal breaker, and it should be as a clinician, if you cannot agree on being willing to begin the process of eliminating and extinguishing these behaviors. All behaviors have a function. So when we think about what that function is, even in this very frightening realm of life-threatening behaviors, it is often to decrease something that is uncomfortable or to increase something that's desirable. So if I go back to that case example, if I am trying to decrease something that is undesirable, right? For that particular person was being alone, and she really wanted her boyfriend to come and rescue her, right? And to increase something desirable, the desirable piece was the connection and the rescue. And so we have to get a sense of what is the function. And from the function in a safety plan, we can then put in a replacement skill. It is not enough to say, well, we're just going to stop engaging in this behavior, because that is more of pushing a client towards change and challenge versus validating. And validating is getting a sense of, oh, it makes sense actually that you would overdose if it means that you would be rescued. So let's find out a way that you can get that sense of rescue without hurting yourself and potentially devastating someone that loves you dearly. And so that is what we have to do with our safety plans, is to incorporate meaningful skills at each stage of dysregulation. So what I would recommend is, as you're establishing a safety plan, let's have the basics in there, right? So you want to have all their identifying information, who would be their emergency contact, where would be their hospital of choice that they would want to go to in the event that something were to happen. And then we put very basic immediate resources beyond them being able to contact you, who are the local kind of crisis connection numbers that they could have in a point of distress. But that should be across the board, I think, for all clients. where we want to nuance that with DBT is then we begin to work a little bit of a continuum from 0, where we're completely calm, our brain is at rest, no problems, to say a 10, where that's when we need to possibly go to the hospital. So let's kind of walk through those different areas and think about what would be the skills that we'd want to apply at those stages. So when a client is at a 0, their brain is at rest, they're very calm. It doesn't mean that they don't need skills. In fact, that's the opportunity to really stockpile skills. So what you're identifying with your client when they're at a level 0 is, what do you need to stay with your brain at rest? How do you know your brain's at rest? So this is where I'd really identify kind of self-soothing activities, things that calm the senses, favorite food, favorite music, favorite things to look at, favorite people to connect with, activities that really are restful and restorative, right? And you also want to identify what are the kind of scenarios or the events where I'm most likely to be at a 0, right? So it may be when I'm with my loved ones or when I'm doing something that I'm really passionate about. And what are the kind of typical thoughts that you have? See how DBT incorporates emotions, thoughts, and actions. So what are some of the emotions? Well, when I'm in that situation, I'm peaceful, calm, rested, right? So you really want them to be able to very much describe what does that 0 look like for you. And then we start taking our steps up, right? So maybe a 1 out of 10 is that something and some event has kind of thrown them off a little bit, right? And so that might be a change in the schedule, right? I didn't plan for it. I might be emotionally a little bit more frustrated, maybe a little bit irritated. So then we think about what are the skills, right? So when we're starting at the beginning of emotional dysregulation, it may be a little bit of irritation, a little bit of agitation. So then we're thinking about maybe incorporating a little bit of the tip skills that we talked about in the previous session, something to maybe deepen our body's ability to calm itself down. So going for a walk, getting out of the environment, right? Breathing through that frustration, right? And we really want the client to be actively thinking about, okay, this is almost like fire prevention. We're trying not to get to the 10. So even at a 1, I'm not going to minimize that. Many clients will. They will try to minimize it. A 1 isn't anything, but just think about when we start at irritation and we avoid it, how much it builds to a powder keg. So then as we take those next steps, maybe the 2 and the 3, we get to 5, that's when we're at that halfway point, right? And that's where the skills need to be more intensive. So like in our previous session, when we're talking about the tip skills and we're doing all these intense activities, what I typically recommend in a safety plan is that more often our clients are in danger when they're isolated. So we're trying to identify ways that they can connect. Even if it is go for a walk, go sit in a coffee shop, right? And again, knowing what their typical para-suicidal gesture is or threats to harm themselves is very important. So we don't want to send them someplace that would double down on it. But for many people, just getting out of their homes changes the way that they're orienting. And so we want to identify where are some places that you can now get out and be connected, right? Who can you call? Who can know that you're struggling? I would definitely say at any point, as we will talk about in an upcoming session, you want to be putting your name as a resource for coaching. Because sometimes our clients, no matter where they are in the continuum, may not know what skill to access, or they may have forgotten what is in their safety plan. And so this safety plan needs to be written out. It is an ongoing, what we call living document that evolves as they continue to understand the skills and things that work for them most effectively at these different stages. So as we're moving past the halfway point and we're getting to that other side, right? So we're moving much closer to 10, then the structure needs to be very detailed. And so this is where We want to make sure that we have identified if they have medications, that there is someone who can lock up their medications. If there is weaponry in the home, that it's under lock and key. And again, having conversations about who are your safe people in those moments. And so then the skills can be even more intensive. So, for example, when I'm working with a client that has a self-harm schedule that's very, very dangerous because, say, they may cut along arterial lines or things like that, we want to certainly have them take those items out of their environment. But also we want to give them a replacement skill. So this is where it's important to understand what is the function even of something like cutting yourself. For some clients, it will be that they're so numb that they're trying to feel something. And for others, it's to punish. So if it's something to punish, then they're looking for pain. And so we want to identify a way that they can have a sensation of pain without creating the destruction that they have normally been engaging in. So that can be finding rubber bands to snap on the wrist. The wrist tends to be very sensitive to any type of sensation, so really a tight snap can help. For some people, though, especially if it's a way to kind of come back and reconnect, we recommend that they take ice now, not along the edges of their face, but to find ice and put ice cubes in their hand. This can also create a bit of pain, but not destructive. So not dry ice, but just regular ice that they can hold in their hands. And the commitment is that you're going to hold it without dropping it until it totally melts. And so, yes, that ice is very, very cold. It will create a bit of pain, but it will also activate the dive reflex. For one client that liked to see her blood flow, which was disturbing, we recognize, she found it was helpful to freeze red drink or like red Kool-Aid, and when it would melt in her hands, it would melt and it would look like blood going down her arms. It gave her space. That's all we're looking for. Can it give you space between the urge to hurt yourself and the urge to ask for help? So the goal here is to have barriers to keep our clients from getting to a 10 out of 10. Because at the 10 out of 10, we are most likely negotiating how to get to the hospital in order to save our client's life. Now, I do want to say something about the 10 out of 10. Because it is skillful if a client has reached the end of their skill usage on their own and are reaching out for coaching to let you know that they need to go to the hospital in order to remain safe. That would be a skillful hospitalization if they have tried all these other steps. And so we certainly do not want to shame a client ever with the necessity of needing to take that step. But we certainly negotiate it to make sure that they are very well understanding that even upon discharge, they will have to learn how to live life with these urges, and that the urges do not have to be lethal, but they can be treated with skills. And so we want to have a clear commitment to working the skills. It is not acceptable if you ask your client, will you be safe tonight? Well, maybe. It's either a yes or no. And if we're at a no, then we're probably at a 10 out of 10. And so we really have to think dialectically and kind of find that middle with our client. But at the same time, we want to empower the client to trust that even when they're starting to feel a little bit off, the skills can be very, very helpful to keep them from getting to that destructive place that has brought them to therapy in the first place. So don't hesitate to be very, very detailed in your safety plans, because indeed, what are we doing? We are building a life worth living.